Food has a new flavour in Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. So, hello everybody, my name is Alessandra Pino, or Ali, and I'm carrying out research on food, the Gothic and cultural memory at the University of Westminster in London. I'm co-authoring a Gothic cookbook as well, a very special kind of recipe book, the first of its kind in fact, with 13 chapters which will each look at a different Gothic novel and what meals there are in the texts and how food is used. Central to A Gothic Cookbook is the idea that food has more to offer than just being a prop or an embellishment, but it actually develops its own story and can give the reader a strong insight into the characters and the plot. We are crowdfunding this project, so if this sounds at all interesting to you, you can head to our Unbound page and have a look there. Each chapter will also have recipes inspired by the meals and ingredients or food items mentioned in the novels, from Dracula, Frankenstein to Jane Eyre, and of course, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Now, food as a signifier is often a subtle indicator of how the Gothic genre uses it to show change, and food is often more and more connected to fear and anxiety, exposing what monsters lurk under the surface of everyday cultural and social propriety. There are sets of rules that provide a cultural indication of what is appropriate and inappropriate when it comes to eating and serving meals. So let's have a look at The Haunting of Hill House and how food shows us just how spooky things can get. In The Haunting of Hill House, Eleanor, Theodora, and Luke all arrive at this long-rumoured to be haunted property under the guidance of Dr. Montague, who is hoping to scientifically prove the existence of the supernatural. Over the course of the summer, the house proves itself to be extremely haunted, and how it does so is also expressed through the way in which consumption occurs. Food and drink providing a spine-tingling insight into how the paranormal manifests itself. During one of their meals, Dr. Montague remarks, "I think I shall have the marmalade. If you would be so kind, thank you. My wife will never believe me. Food has a new flavour. Do you find it so?" To which Luke replies, "It isn't just that Mrs. Dudley has surpassed herself then, I was wondering." Aha, Mrs. Dudley. We come to our first crucial Hill House food moments with Mrs. Dudley. Now, she is the housekeeper of Hill House and a really fascinating character, who we mainly find in the kitchen, cooking or preparing things. Mrs. Dudley repeats on many occasions that she leaves the house before it gets dark. In fact, she doesn't stay after she sets out dinner. The kitchen is normally the focal point of a home, in many ways a place you cannot get away from because you sit down and talk to people. It acts as a sort of hub. And the way the kitchen in Hill House is structured is so that there are many doors around it, and all the doors make it easier for Mrs. Dudley to escape when she needs to, shall we say. Mrs. Dudley's robotic preparation and announcements regarding food have a mesmerizing quality to them, and the guests become empty vessels under her watch. It's nearly as if Mrs. Dudley feeds them so that they can be sacrificed to the house, a little bit like in Hansel and Gretel, where they're being fattened up in a sense so that monstrous things can then occur. After dark falls, the guests and whoever is in Hill House belongs to it. That is why Mrs. Dudley repeats on many occasions that she leaves before it gets dark. In fact, she doesn't stay after she sets out dinner. Food is used in this sense to lull the guests into a false sense of security, creating a feeling of familiarity within a food framework of what life outside of the house has already accustomed the guests with: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. A sense of the uncanny, an unfamiliarity in the familiar, is created by the fact that when they all finish eating, they need to get up and leave the dirty dishes and plates as they are on the table for Mrs. Dudley to clean away in the morning. This rarely happens in a home. You might leave things by the sink or in the sink perhaps, but I would say that it is rare that you would leave everything as it is on the table itself after a meal. This creates a feeling of discomfort, even if we just think about doing this in our own homes. And Eleanor comments on this. In fact, she says, "My mother would never let me get up and leave a table looking like this until morning." To which Theodora responds, "If she wants to leave before dark, she has to clear away in the morning. I'm certainly not going to do it." It's not nice to walk away and leave a dirty table. You couldn't get them back on the right shelves anyway, and she'd have to do it all over again just to get your finger marks off things. If I just took the silverware and let it soak. No, Theodora said, catching her hand. Do you want to go out into that kitchen all alone with all those doors? No, Eleanor said, setting down the handful of forks that she had gathered. I guess I don't really. She lingered to look uneasily at the table, at the crumpled napkins and the drop of wine spilled by Luke's place, and shook her head. I don't know what my mother would say, though. Theodora and Eleanor pick up a certain nervousness attached to Mrs. Dudley when it comes to the house and the fact that they need to respect the timing surrounding meals. They also notice that there are an odd number of doors in the kitchen, gesturing to the fact that Mrs. Dudley might need multiple escape routes for some reason. Eleanor says, our good Mrs. Dudley likes doors, doesn't she? She can certainly, and their eyes met, get out fast in any direction if she wants to. I wonder if she had Dudley cut extra doors for her. I wonder how she likes working in a kitchen where a door in the back of her might open without her knowing it. I wonder actually just what Mrs. Dudley is in the habit of meeting in her kitchen, so that she wants to make sure that she'll find a way out no matter which direction she runs. Now, there are a few references to how Mrs. Dudley may or may not be working for Dracula throughout the book, and Theodora and Eleanor discuss whether Mrs. Dudley is actually watching over them for Dracula, who might be located in the house somewhere, since they have noticed bats in the building itself. At one point, Theodora starts feeling as if she were walking up the walls, which also leads us back to Dracula. So as mentioned, we start to understand that Mrs. Dudley is acting on behalf of someone else, feeding these guests and food, and its mechanical timings are used to lull the guests into a false sense of security, a false sense of home, and a false sense of family. The way in which Mrs. Dudley cooks alerts them to their food being ready, makes them coffees and snacks, and her announcements regarding food have a hypnotic quality. She repeats the same things over and over again. I have breakfast ready for you at 9. That's the way I do it. That's the way I agreed to do, with an emphasis on the fact that she does not wait on people, but one gets the feeling that she is in some way serving the house and how she keeps them alive through keeping them fed. And she does this constantly through feasts that are described as magnificent, and her cooking skills are commented on by all as being excellent. Again, a little bit like in Hansel and Gretel. Mrs. Dudley will say things like, I hope I see you alive when I come back in the morning and your dinner's on the sideboard, all in one sentence. And it is Theodora who refers to both Mr. and Mrs. Dudley as working for and with Dracula. Luke says, sacrificing me for a cup of coffee, do not be surprised, and I say it darkly, do not be surprised if you lose your Luke in this cause. Perhaps Mrs. Dudley has not yet had her mid-morning snack, and she's perfectly capable of a filet de Luc à la Meunière, or perhaps Diepoise, depending upon her mood. I entreat you to regard your lunch with the gravest suspicion. Dr. Montague says at one point, commenting on Mrs. Dudley's wonderful feasts, I congratulate myself. I have led you to civilization through the uncharted wastes of Hill House. The doctor is implying that food is what makes them human, when in fact, what the narrative suggests is that it is leading them closer and closer to danger. So the food tricks them, as it's always so incredibly tasty. But when the guests notice their own feelings, when it comes to identifying what this haunting entity wants from them, they note that it is looking to consume us, to take us into itself, to make us part of the house, maybe. Oh dear, says Eleanor. Eleanor does also mention that she feels like a small creature swallowed by a monster, and that the monster could feel her tiny movements inside. So we see how the house is presented as a maternal space that regenerates itself through the guests, who are themselves being fed within its walls and within its belly, possibly, or body. The outside space also presents a menace, as we can see from the following passage. Eleanor and Theodora follow a path and arrive at a garden, their eyes blinded with the light of sun and rich colour. Incredibly, there was a picnic party on the grass in the garden. and they could hear the laughter of children and the affectionate, amused voices of the mother and father. There was a checked tablecloth spread out, and smiling, the mother leaned over to take up a plate of bright fruit. Then Theodora screams and tells Eleanor to run without looking back. Eleanor was worried she might trip over a puppy, but as they run, they realized that as they ran across the garden, there was nothing except weeds growing blackly in the darkness. And Theodora, screaming still, trampled over the bushes where there had been flowers and stumbled, sobbing, over half-buried stones and what might have been a broken cup. They managed to arrive to the back door and into the kitchen, where Luke and the doctor express how worried they were for them, and to which Eleanor responds, "It was a picnic. We tried to get out. It was a picnic. The children." Now, the paranormal picnic experience Eleanor has, its different temporal dimensions, reflects this false sense of security and family, which could be interpreted as Eleanor's idealization of family life, which she failed to have during her early years, as her father died when she was a child, and this left her with a difficult mother and sister to deal with. Eleanor's vision of that picnic is a mirage, something intangible, and it's even more out of place in the grounds of a location such as Hill House. It's an idea that can never become concrete, and which leaves our aspiring family-seeking heroine cold and grief-stricken in the end. Where everything else is false, the perfect meals provide the form of the food, of what food should do, but not the feelings. I think Eleanor's intention when entering Hill House was to begin a process of growth and independence, but in fact we observe a sort of regression back towards a childhood state, the childhood that she never had. When Eleanor observes the family at the start of her journey towards Hill House and the child insisting on her cup of stars, Eleanor sides with her, with the girl she wished she'd been. "Don't give in," Eleanor told the little girl. "Insist on your cup of stars. Once they have trapped you into being like everyone else, you will never see your cup of stars again." Hill House proves to be Eleanor's own cup of stars. Upon her arrival at its door, she is confronted with a heavy iron knocker that had a child's face. The child she never was haunts Eleanor. It sounds like something children do, not mothers knocking against the wall for help. She hears babbling and gurgling, and she's sure that it's a child. "They have been hurting a child, and I won't let anyone hurt a child," she says. And as she traverses the house in a childlike manner to the chorus from an old children's song, "Go in and out the windows," the house becomes a parallel domestic space where she becomes one with whatever walked alone, to the point that the others suspect her of being to blame for some of the strange goings on in the house. Possessed by the disappointment of a lost childhood, a childhood different from her idea, she asks herself, "Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why don't they stop me?" The seemingly secure framework provided symbolically by food timings and habits all come to a head in this final moment that uncovers her truth. Eleanor is an echo of times past, of a life she has never lived. The new flavor mentioned by Dr. Montague at the beginning makes one think of something artificial. The food is so good that it is perhaps too good to be true, just like Eleanor's idealized vision of what family and childhood should look like, perhaps, or what it could have been in an alternate reality. Thank you very much for listening.